The leaders are there to serve their people are not there to serve the leader. I was a lieutenant colonel in the army. I served for 23 years in the British Army.
He commanded a Parachute Regiment battalion, ran the Military of Defence Security training for the London 2012 Olympic Games.
Most people's exposure to the military is through film. And the reality is that people can go through full careers and never see a shot fired in anger.
Yeah, that's really different from what I imagined. Can we talk about building up the leadership then?
Yeah, when a lot of people think of military leadership, and different countries have different approaches. The military have been very good at the task. They've been very focused on them. Everything's ultimately about the mission. But as with society, particularly Western society, there's a lot more focus on the individual. That's right. In some ways that's gone too far. But high-performing teams, collaborative teams, are willing to have the tough conversations. The industry focuses far too much on the individual and not about what does it mean to follow. But leadership is that human connection. They would choose whether they want to follow you or not.
Can we talk about the debriefing style in military leadership and then the normal leadership?
There's so much in there.
One core idea, what is it then?
One core idea.
I want to know the stories. What is the tensions? How is that leadership looks like it in the British Army?
I guess the first thing to say is, when people think of army leadership, they often go to the extreme. They often think of the Hollywood films where...
As I did.
Yeah, and it's very natural because that's most people's exposure to the military is through film or through the news when you just hear about the worst case. And the reality is that people can go through full careers, decades-long careers, and never see a shot fired in anger. And even for those that did, and even those that served in Afghanistan and Iraq, those incidents where they're actually engaged in a firefight may be seconds or minutes or hours of a full career. And many people who deployed may never see those sorts of incidents. So, but ultimately everything that and this is the same, the military is the world over, everything that the military does in peacetime is geared towards that final ultimatum, that final purpose of having to fight. And I guess the way that the army develops its people and develops its capability, it's what we call our operational effectiveness, is by putting people into environments that are as close to that reality as possible without anyone shooting back at you. So we would frequently escalate our training so that we're training for days or weeks on end, and you're cold, you're wet, you're tired, you're stressed, and you're put into positions where you're having to make rapid decisions under that sort of duress, with all the complex dynamics of the battlefield, with live ammunition, real bullets flying around and bombs, but nothing coming back at you. So there's an element of familiarity when you do get into those situations. There's an element of familiarity to a lot of what you do, and a lot of it is muscle memory. It's like anything. If you're a sports person, you train hard every single day. You can't replicate being on the starting line of the Olympics final with all the nerves and the anticipation, because that's the first time you've ever done it. But everything else is familiar to you. And I guess it's the same for military folk. You never know how you're going to react when you're faced with an adversary, but everything else up until then is familiar. And the leadership aspect of that is all part of that. You've built up that sense of, you built up that trust, you built up that sense of belonging, you built up that understanding of one another. There's a lot of alignment in terms of your tactics, your rules, your processes. So a lot of it is quite familiar and habitual. And it's like anything, if you're expecting people to act in a certain way under stress and under pressure, whether it be in business or the military or sport or elsewhere, you've got to build up to that, and you've got to train for that. It's got to be part of your everyday training. Everyday training or everyday living.
Yeah.
Because you can't expect people to be different under pressure.
Yeah.
It has to be habitual. So it's how you develop your people. So all the hard work is done before you step over the starting line, really. It's in the and it's the same with leadership.
Yeah.
You can't expect people to trust you when it matters most if you haven't built up those relationships every single day.
Exactly. So can we talk about like building up the leadership then?
Yeah.
Like let's using the army leadership versus business,
Yeah.
like in the real settings.
Yeah.
So building up the leadership, what's the importance element do you think the most?
Let's take it right back. What is leadership? In its most simple terms, leadership is the act of an individual influencing other individuals or individuals in a team in order to achieve a shared outcome. So it's about influence is about motivation. So how do you build up? You build up personal relationships. You build up that trust, and that trust is born. I often talk about the 5 C's of trust. Why do we trust one another? I trust you because of competency. I believe you're competent in what you do.
Yeah.
We trust doctors
I can
and
rely
nurses.
on you. Yeah.
Yeah, I can rely on you because I know that you're good at your job. Consistency. So you're consistent in your performance. So I trust you to give you a project to deliver or an outcome to deliver because I know you're going to deliver to a certain standard because you're consistent in your standards. Character, really important. Maybe we come back to that. But I trust you because our values are broadly aligned. And I know what you stand for. And I know that you are willing to stand up for what you believe in. You live by your values. You don't say one thing and do another. Really important. How many leaders have you worked with who doubt their integrity? It's difficult to trust someone.
I mean, good leaders. Really.
Good leaders.
Yeah,
Good leaders.
good leaders. Yeah.
Good leaders that you respect and want to follow, most importantly, rather than people who are in a position of authority, which is different. Courage. So the courage to, I trust you because you've got the courage to make tough decisions, to take risk, but you also got the courage to say, I don't know, and I failed. And, that vulnerability-based trust that Patrick Lencioni talks about. And the last one, and one of the most important, I'd say character and care is the last one. Really, really important. As in, we trust someone because ultimately I believe that you've got my interests at heart. You're looking after me. That doesn't mean that you have to have my interests at heart every single day because the task may be more important or other people's, the team dynamics may be more important than what. But ultimately I believe that you've got my interests at heart. And I think when you're talking about building up leadership and ability to influence others, I think a lot of those factors come into it. How do you, because leadership, and here's, I think, an issue that I struggle with in this multi-billion, we've spoken about it before, this multi-billion-dollar industry that is leadership and leadership development. It's pretty much all focused on the leader, the man or woman out in front. And there's an expectation, you read it all the time, didn't you? The top 10 traits of great leaders, or do these 7 steps to great leadership and everything will be, everyone will perform to their best. But the reality is that those that are following, the recipients of that influence, are human beings with choice and agency. They would choose whether they want to follow you or not. And therefore there's a dynamic between the two. And just because I may show certain traits that I think are good leadership traits, you may perceive it differently.
Doesn't align with my values.
Doesn't align with your values or
my beliefs.
Or your beliefs, or let's say I come into the team and I'm the new boss. I'm in this position, and you've had a bad experience within this team, and the past 2 bosses you've really struggled with. Yeah. So straight away you're perceiving me in this position.
Yeah.
And I'm on the back foot already.
Yeah.
That's nothing that I've done. It's just about your perception of me in that role. Or let's say female leaders in an all-male environment can sometimes experience this. They come into a role and sometimes they're on the back foot straight away just because of they're female and not male.
Stereotypes.
Because of stereotypes and people's perception of that. So all these factors come into play here, where the reality is that there's 2 sides to a leadership partnership. And so I think understanding how to develop followers, how to get people to willingly follow you is key. And again, you've heard me talk about this story before, that when I stood in front of my first platoon of 30 soldiers, I was fresh out of training, and I was stood in front of 30 paratroopers with decades of experience ahead. And I was the most inexperienced person there. I was this boss, I was the senior person because I'd been selected and I'd been through officer training. But my platoon sergeant had been in the army for 20 years and he fought in the Falklands War. He'd been there and seen it and done it. And here I was, this fresh-faced, young kid out of training. Yeah. And I was in charge. I was the one that ultimately was responsible for the performance of the team and the decisions that we would all make. and yet I was the most inexperienced one. So I actually relied on them so much because they had the experience.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of the leadership sat amongst them because they had the experience and the respect and trust. And, so there were some key individuals there, my platoon sergeant and my young corporals, young is an all-male platoon, so young men in their early to mid-20s, vastly experienced, lots of people looking up to them. They had lots of the power to influence. And yet here I was, the boss.
Yeah.
And it took time to build up those relationships, that trust.
I think it's going to be so a challenge, especially people saying that you're just the young kids are fresh on the ground.
Yeah.
And we're here, we fight our life.
Yeah.
We know what's going on.
We've been
So
here.
how was that happen? Tell us the story. I want to hear the story.
Well, I think
I mean, it happens the same time. It's like a young, people being promoted as their leader in their 30s, and then when they're leading lots of more seniors people. So for those situations, share us with the experience, how you building your credits, your trust.
Yeah, you have to be good at your job. And you have to be, you may not be the finished article, and there may be people who have more experience, but you acknowledge that. You say, listen, I'm here to learn.
So you acknowledge that. Okay, you acknowledge
that and say, I need your help. For me to do my job, to lead you all, because ultimately I'm the decision maker. But for us to perform as a team, we need to help one another. So I need to lean on you as much as, or more than you at the stage you lean on me. So I need your support. And that empowers them and makes them feel valued. You've been chosen for the right reason, and you're competent. You could be the best person. You could be their best mate, and they could know that you really care about them. But if you're no good at your job, that there's ultimately a flaw there. So I took time to learn from them, and I would often pull one or two of them aside and say, listen, what do I do here? Can you help me out? What's your best advice? And sometimes you have to know when to take that advice and when not to.
That's also hard.
That's always hard because you don't always get it right.
Yeah.
But I also think it's about, again, demonstrating that you care for the people that are in front of you. So we had times on that tour where at different times of the day, we'd have people on watchtowers on sentry duty, just, keeping an eye out, security of the base. And I would go out in 2 or 3 in the morning and go up and see them. So everyone else is asleep and they'd be rotating around their various guard duties. And you go and see them at, 2 or 3 in the morning.
Wow.
Sit there.
When they're on shift.
Yeah,
so
sit them with a cup of tea.
You're there with them.
So you're there with them and they know that, all right, you're willing to put the hard hours in like there. You're not doing their job, but you're willing to share some of the hardships with them. And also, there's part of you is just keeping an eye and making sure that they're doing their job. And part of it is learning.
Monitoring at the same time.
Yeah, kind of, without being underhand. But,
But it's not your real intention to monitoring.
No.
It's be there with them.
Yeah, there's certain standards that we all have and have to adhere to, and your role is to ensure that everyone is adhering to it. So there's an element of that. But ultimately, you're there to, I'd go up and have a cup of tea with them at, whatever time of night, and just talk like human beings.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're a senior person and you've got junior people in your team, and there's this power difference.
Yeah.
And then, the boss is actually quite normal and is a bit like us, and and you share some of your life experiences and they share some of theirs, and you get to know them as human beings. And that's how you make connections, isn't it? But you also then get to understand what their issues and what their problems are. And in the military, more than I see in business, it's a responsibility of leaders to really know their people, and not just in the work environment, but their families and their home lives, because there's almost an obligation to support all aspects of individuals because they sacrifice so much and their families sacrifice so much to serve. There's a sort of moral duty to look after the individual in the entirety.
I think that's the big difference, because in the business world, we think about that's your privacy.
Yeah.
The leader think, okay, that's your family, where you go to, like your families, your holidays, and then once you're off the work, the leaders try to give you space.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that even within the military, there's an element of, you don't have to expose all of your private life to
but
the military.
But still knowing that's your wife, your parents, and your kids, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it's also, that's a mutual understanding that if support is needed, where possible, the military has an obligation to support that.
So it goes deeper.
It goes deeper
compared to the real life business.
Yeah.
In the way, right?
Yeah. I think in business, you're right. There's a clearer divide between work and home life. But I think sometimes that may be used as an excuse by business leaders not to know their people well enough.
But they should.
And they should.
Yeah, they should.
Because if you show up to work one day and you've had a rough day at home because
and
you've got
kids.
Your kids are playing up, or they're having problems at school.
Or I have problematic kids.
Yeah, or problematic kids, or ill parents, or difficult relationship at home. You bring that into work. That's part of you. It's part of who you are in the workplace. You don't just shut off on those emotions. It impacts how you perform ultimately and how you interact with people.
The business people can go a bit further.
I think they can go further
to show them that they really care about their staff.
It's just about being human.
Yes, human.
It's being respectful and if you want to keep things personal, that your kids having problems at school, for example, then that's absolutely fine. But equally, I'm here to support and help, and if need be, give you a bit of time off, or at least I understand the difficulties you're having. So if you're having a bit of an off day, then I'm more empathetic to that.
I think this point is we want to point out, like most executives, they rely on the HR looking after like those family things. But real good leader, they could learn from what you're describing in the army leader, right?
I think
being more human.
I think they must. That's leadership. That's the difference between leadership and command. Or command as we call it. Command is about being in the
actions.
Well, command is a position of authority. Command is a position of authority and the responsibility and accountability that comes with that. So CEO, team leader, divisional leader, partner, whatever it may be. That's a title, that's a status, and you have authority that comes with that. But leadership is that human connection, and the two work together. But so to lead someone, for you to willingly follow, not because I'm telling you, because I'm
not just
I'm your
from
boss.
The commands part.
Yeah,
it's the leadership.
Because I want to follow you, because I respect you and I trust you, and I'll go the extra mile because I know that you care for me, and I know that you've got my best interests at heart.
Yeah.
And I know that together we're going to achieve great things.
Yeah.
And you're not going to agree with me every time, and you're not going to give me what I want every time, because sometimes, as I said before, sometimes the team dynamics need to take priority, or the task needs to take priority. Yeah, and also there's also a realization that when you're in that position. So I was a platoon commander, so I was in charge of 30 people. Ultimately the decisions, I would be accountable for the decisions that we all made. So if one of my soldiers made a decision that didn't work out very well, they might get into a bit of trouble. They got to own that. But ultimately, I own that accountability. And so I think there's also a realization to yourself and the team realizing that you're willing to take that responsibility. You're not going to blame others. Yes, that classic thing of success is the team's success. The team's failure is your failure. And you own it. It sounds like a bit of a cliche, but I think there's that mindset that you're there to support the team and do everything for them, because collectively you're going to perform much better as a result. But if people screw up or fail, you're going to take that on their behalf, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. But my question is I remember you shared a story on the field in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
What you command, what's your task.
Yeah.
But on the fields, your soldiers, basically critical moments can change in their plans. It's not the actions not always goes as planned.
Yeah. Never goes to plan.
Yeah, never goes to plan.
Yeah.
And then so in that case, it wasn't your command, it wasn't your decision then, right? You still need to be accountable for that, right?
Yeah, you're still accountable for that. And I guess this goes on to the point about, is the whole thing around empowerment, or what we would call mission command. And I think when a lot of people think of military leadership, and different countries have different approaches, they think of this very hierarchical organization, and there is very clear hierarchies in the military. There's a clear accountability, a clear responsibility at all levels. A command structure is clear. But the way power is diffused, they try and push decision making down as far down as possible to where decisions need to be made. Because you go back 200 years, and it's mirrors society. Society used to be, and certainly in the West, it's different in different countries. It used to be very hierarchical. Now it's a lot flatter. And the military has evolved as in the same way. And so what we're trying to do is give people the resources, the autonomy, and the agency to make the decisions that they need to make at that moment without referring back to senior authority, because it just slows things down. And I see businesses some are very good at it, and some are trying to evolve their approach more and more in this vein, because the world is far too dynamic, far too complex for this rigid hierarchy where just, information goes up and decisions come down because it's too slow. And it's about empowering people, far down as possible. And so that when crisis hits, the soldiers can just react because they have trained, and you've built a culture where they know they've got the ability to make decisions. They've got the trust. They know they've got each other's back. They've got the resources to do what they need to do, and the training kicks in. But ultimately, people have that confidence to make those difficult decisions without having to refer back to. There are clear boundaries, though. There's sometimes where we are very prescriptive. If these things happen, you cannot make a decision. That's got to be deferred to a higher authority.
You see.
So, for example, an extreme example, but if we were dropping bombs from an aircraft, a young soldier couldn't make that decision because of the impact of. So that would have to be deferred to the ground force commander. So I would have to make that decision. They would give me the information, and I would do my assessment based on lots of different factors that we have to adhere to whether that was the appropriate action in that moment in time. And there are lots of other, there's some really rigid constraints that we have to conform to, quite rightly, both legal constraints and moral constraints we have to adhere to. So it's very clear when you're delegating decisions to people that setting those boundaries, these are your freedoms and these are your constraints, is really, really important. The constraints as much as the freedoms. And you'll find that the clearer those boundaries are, the more confident people are to make the decisions within those. If those boundaries are a bit vague, then people struggle to own that empowerment, if that makes sense.
Completely makes sense. And then what do you think the business hasn't done correctly as the Army leadership? Or in other words, what the business world can do a better job?
Yeah, I wouldn't say correctly, because I don't think there's a right or wrong here. And there's lots of things that the Army, the military, and other militaries do that aren't the best way of doing things. I don't sit here to say that the Army has
could be do better.
Yeah, and we've got, like any organisation, we've got, I say we, my old we, have got flaws as much as any other organisation. Where I do see there is a real difference. So one of the models, the go-to model that I always refer to, it's a model that a senior general in the Army would remember from their first few weeks of training at Sandhurst, where we were training officers, is a John Adair's leadership model, and it's a Venn diagram of three balls, which is task, team, and individual. And in that model, it's a really simple model, but it says so much about leadership. The leader's role is to balance the competing needs of the task that needs to be achieved, the team that need to perform collectively together, and the individual within that team. And the reality is that you can never balance those competing needs equally all the time. So in a military example, take a military example, if we have to assault an enemy trench, it's all about the task, and it's all about that mission, to the point where individuals may die and that there may be fractures in the team. But as a result, when that mission is over, the leader owes the debt to the team and the individual. So we may then come back into camp and we debrief as a team, and we work out what went right, what went wrong, and we build up that team again. So they're ready to go out, they're cohesive, they learn from the mistakes, and they're good to go again. You may get around your individuals, all who have had different experiences and reacted in different ways. Some are fine, some are shaken up, some are upset, whatever it may be, and you get around and you repay that debt to the individual. I see in historically the military have been very good at the task. They've been very focused on everything's ultimately about the mission. It's been very good at the team because it understands the importance of building that collective sense of identity and ethos and esprit de corps and belonging. And people literally put their lives on the line for each other, for that team, that tribe they're part of. It's a really visceral, raw human emotion. We've all experienced it in different parts of our lives, that sense of belonging to something special. So it's been very good at building teams. Historically, it hasn't been so good at looking after the individual, but as with society, particularly Western society, very individualistically minded, there's a lot more focus on the individual. And some would argue we're getting the balance wrong, but that's for another day. In business, and this is a broad generalization, very task focused. It's all about performance. It's all about execution. It's all about high performance, and that's important. And you can't be successful unless you have that thirst for performance, thirst for the task.
Yeah.
But it's got to come at a balance between the individual and the team. In business, individuals are focused on, but it tends to be quite transactional, can be.
Yeah.
Incentivized by promotion, incentivized by financial gain.
Yeah.
Again, broad generalization. Far less focus on the team. Often because there's systemic issues that motivate individuals rather than team performers. I think performance in business would be far greater, is a greater emphasis on building great teams. Building those relationships, building that trust, building that collaboration, which a lot of people talk about in business. They get it, conceptually they get it, but often the system gets in the way and people are incentivized, and the culture is such that it's all about individuals performing well in order to achieve it.
I mean, what you talk about is really interesting. Is about the individualized, right?
Yeah.
And then collective as a group. So, and this is a task. So Asian culture is more focused on the team.
Absolutely.
Collectivism.
Yeah.
And then Western culture, like a business culture, is more focused on individual.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the best way is finding a balance.
It's finding a balance.
Combine them together.
Yeah. And I've worked a little bit in Asia, and that sense of the team and the collective is very, very strong.
Very strong.
It can come at the detriment of the individual, though. So to your point, there's not always that balance. And I think in the West, I think I focus on the individual.
Individual, majority.
And I think in some ways that's right. In some ways that's gone too far. And that's one thing that I really valued in my previous profession was, yes, individuals are important, and we will genuinely care for individuals as much as we can, but it's about the team. And the two work together, because we all know how powerful it is to be part of something, a strong family, a strong community, a strong team, a strong tribe. It's and that, one supports the other. But I think in Western society, we've gone too far.
Yeah,
but
I guess you using this, if I talk about that, because I know you coaching, you coach some elite sports as clubs as well. I guess the take example like a football, which is a team effort. You utilize a lot of how to, for your work, for your coaching work, how to combine this individual together with the group performance, right, to get to the winning point. Is that right?
Yeah, and you see really successful, sport is a great example, and there's plenty throughout sport history whereby teams can have the best players in the world and they will be beaten by less capable teams, but they work better as a team. So individually, the players on one team may be the best in the world, but they can't work together as a team, and they'll get beaten by those that can. Basketball's a great example. The Chicago Bulls in the early 90s with Phil Jackson taking over as the manager, and they hadn't won an NBA title, and Phil Jackson came in, and they had some of the best players in the world. Some of the icons of the sport. And Michael Jordan and others, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman, and these were phenomenal players, but they weren't performing as a team. And Phil Jackson came in and created that we not me mindset, and he cared for the individuals, and he understood that each player was very different personalities, different skills, different. They brought something special and very individual, but they all had to be treated differently because they're different personalities. Some are extroverts, some are introverts. Some needed to let off steam, some were show, all very different. And he treated them differently. But he said, ultimately, it's about the team. It's not about the individual. And if you think you're more important than everyone else here, then you might as well leave. And he created that sense of belonging and set a clear purpose and a vision of what they wanted to achieve. And they went on to great things.
Exactly. This is lots of examples with coaches or captains or executive CEOs working on the team consolidates like the team performance rather than just the individuals.
Yeah.
Right? Since you team
Force
coach,
multiply.
yeah. Since you are working on team coaching in Miller Campbell, so could you give us like a 3 takeaway from this conversation, how the CEOs can consolidate their teams?
So firstly, I think there's clarity and expectations, clarity on purpose, clarity on vision, clarity on what is required of your people, and consistent, clear communication. Because that creates alignment. And unless there's alignment, unless everyone's on the same page, it's hard to work together. So I think there's definitely an element of that clarity of communication. I think the second, and this is where leadership really comes in, is setting that environment where people feel safe to have the conversations they need to have. Doesn't mean they agree, but high performing teams, collaborative teams, are willing to have the tough conversations. And the tone is set at the top. Excuse me, the tone is set by the leader creating the conditions that allow people to feel safe. There's lots to talk about psychological safety, but there is appreciated that there is power dynamics in any room, particularly with hierarchies. How do you create an environment where people are willing to say what they want to say?
Or say no for your decisions
Or
with the reasons.
Or say no with evidence, with a rationale, but understanding they may disagree and you may make a decision that doesn't align with them, but that's fine. They've had their voice, they've had their say, and then they fall behind. That's really important. You have that dissent, you have that challenge, but ultimately when the decision is made, everyone falls behind that decision, whether they agree with it or not, and go forward as one team.
So go back to the first one, be consistent. It's the process of being everybody can talk, but still going back to the clear missions. And then once the decision makes, everybody go ahead. Right?
Yeah, if you're clear about what you want to achieve, then everyone can debate about how you achieve that.
Yeah.
You do that in the room, but when you step out of the room, you're one voice.
Yeah. And was there another one then? There's a third one.
And then I would my go-to is about empowerment. How do you push decision making as far down we would call it the chain of command.
Yeah.
How would you push it as far down as possible? Because it's one of the key motivators one of the key factors that drives a motivation. If you give people responsibility, clear responsibility with boundary, resource, everything we talked about, most people rise to the challenge. And you see it with troubled kids. They haven't had that support, that love, whatever it may be. And you put them in an environment where you give them a little bit of responsibility. So you've got this, encourage them. You see it all the time. They step up to the plate and they grow and they develop. I think that serves well in business as well.
That's really good. It's free advice, out of many. Yeah. I want to also ask you about the debrief. We talked about this before.
Yeah.
Because I assuming in the army leadership, military leadership, your debriefing is very straightforward style. Okay, what's the task being completed, like finished, right?
Yeah.
What we did wrong, how we can do better.
Yeah.
There's no such a thing. Everything's perfect, but.
Yeah.
So I guess, can we talk about the debriefing style in military leadership and then the normal leadership then? I assume it's completely different because especially in British here, you don't want to hurt people's feeling, right?
Yeah, we spoke about this before. There is that.
But American and then French, they don't care. They just get to the point.
Yeah, there's certain European countries, and America's pretty good at it as well. They're a lot more forthright.
Yeah.
And you see it in business. You know, there's certain nations that are a lot more forthright and say exactly how it is.
Yeah, but that's for business words. And military is okay. How you debrief?
So
How was your? Yeah. How did you?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing about debriefing is when do you debrief, because inevitably we would always do what we call a hot debrief. So if we come off the ground from a particular mission, you come off the helicopter or get out the transport and you go straight to the operations room or the debriefing room. You put your kit down, grab a tea or coffee, and you go straight into it. And it's led by someone, normally the operations person, and you go through the operation chronologically. You start with the mission, what we're there to achieve, and then you go through it chronologically, and you talk about exactly that: what went right, what went wrong, with a particular focus on what went wrong, not to apportion blame on people, but to understand, right, when we go out the door again, how are we going to rectify that? You know, is that a fault in our capabilities? Is that a fault in our equipment, our resources, or did something go wrong on the day? Things always go wrong. So it's not about apportioning blame, but it is about understanding. It's all about, you know, the mission, and ultimately lives are at stake here, because if you make the same mistakes going out again, you may have got lucky and got away with it that time, may not do the next time. So
But this is called hot debrief.
it's called a hot debrief.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hot because you've literally come off the ground. Now the real benefit of that is that it's all fresh. It's in people's minds, and they can tell it straight away as they saw it and as they experience it. I guess the downside is that you're heightened emotions, so you know, so that can taint the way you view things. But the important thing is rapid understanding of learning of lessons, so that you can rectify things straight away before you go out again. But there's also times where you do a slower after action review. So it may be you may do it after a period of, you know, weeks or months, where it's perhaps more deliberate. It's a similar sort of approach, but it's more deliberate and
with a general bigger picture.
A bigger picture, and there's less emotion involved as well. And
Yeah.
you can gather data and evidence to add into that. But the after action debrief is normally far more, should we say, robust. It's far more deliberate. But I've also worked with teams, and I guess it goes back to your piece about
Why is the business so bad about that?
Well, I think there's a difference in the culture. That's the first thing I was going to say, because I've worked with teams in the military who struggle giving difficult feedback. They struggle saying where things went wrong.
Oh,
yeah. The highest performing team, the best parts of the military I've worked with, are very good at it, and it's very robust. And there may be a rank and that's another thing that gets in the way of the military sometimes. People are afraid to say the senior person got it wrong, because there's that power differential with ranks is so ingrained into the way we do business for good reason, but also ill. You know, it's one of our greatest strengths and our greatest weaknesses. But sometimes that gets in the way of real, honest feedback.
I think it's not just the military.
And you see it business. It's a human thing.
Yeah,
definitely.
I can't say this. My CEO says things wrong.
Exactly. And that goes back to that safety bit.
Yeah.
You know, the CEO setting the tone.
Yeah. Even though I'm wrong, you can say it, right?
Exactly. And and this isn't just in debriefs. This is in meetings. This is everyday life. You know, unless the CEO is willing to, you know, accept differences of opinion and being told, I think you're wrong. What you did, your decision was with evidence and respectfully. Unless that tone is set, and there's always a balance. You know, you've it's not a free for all. But yeah, that needs to be the culture of the organisation. That allows these sorts of things, you know, debriefs to be a lot more robust. And as I say, the best performing military organisations I've worked with, the same rank structure, but it's a far flatter organisation, and people are very willing to, you know, voice their views and opinions, because they know it's all about the mission. It's not blaming people. It's not pointing fingers. It's ultimately about making sure that when you go out again, you're going to get it right, because the lives are on the line. It's the ultimate pursuit of professionalism, really.
Yeah, that's really different from what I imagined, because military is about the barking orders, all about hierarchy from my imagination. But what you just said as it improves me wrong perception then.
Yeah, I think that's an old school approach to in basic training. When you start off, it's a lot more transactional.
Yeah.
But in everyday military life, the hierarchy is very clear.
Yeah.
You know, we wear our ranks on our sleeves. It's very clear. And I say that is a real benefit, because you know who are the decision makers and who's responsible. And sometimes that can get in the way of honest conversations, I say.
But in a high.
It's not about barking orders. It's about clarity of communication. It's about clear intent, and it's about giving people responsibility and then letting them run with it. And yeah, from my experience, it goes back to the empowerment. I'm such a believer in it. If you empower people to deliver and give them what they need to succeed, 9 times out of the 10, they knock it out of the park, and they normally deliver far better than you expected them to.
That goes back to the trust.
It goes back to trust and mutual respect.
Yeah.
And and I've worked with a team before with half the team were from Eastern Europe and half from the UK. And the UK team thought the Eastern Europeans are really abrupt, and almost rude at times. Yeah. And then the East Europeans just couldn't understand. You know, just say what you think, say what you feel, Brits. And they're always having to read between the lines of what the Brits are actually saying.
Yeah.
And they were laughing and joking about it, but you know, you can see the national cultures playing out, and you see it all the time.
It's a national culture, or the different type of leadership culture.
But I think it's all ultimately it's born of a natural,
Yeah.
I mean, it is a national culture. Because to your point, you know, your experience, the French are behaving a certain way, the Americans, the Dutch, you know, and we can, you know, Western versus Asian.
Yeah.
And we've all got similar experiences. So there's definitely a sort of national way of approach there.
Yeah.
It's real products of our history.
It's very funny then. So what is your advice how to do debrief without let your employee feel being blamed then?
Yeah, I think it's about really being clear on the purpose of the debrief, and again, it's the leader setting the tone of why we need to learn collectively. There will always be times where, again, this goes back to clear boundaries. If people do something that step beyond those boundaries, you know, a value is broken or a rule is broken, then you know people are to be held to account. But if an action was taken place with good intent and it just didn't work out, then there's a difference between
being blamed or whitewash, right?
Yeah, being blamed or as I say, are we learning to get better next time? You know, it's all about the framing. This is about us getting better, being better at what we do, better product, better service. Because if people feel that they're being blamed, they're not going to open up. They're not going to admit things.
No.
So all the things that are going wrong are going to be hidden beneath the surface, and ultimately you're not going to.
Yeah. All we talk about is leadership, but what about fellowship?
Yeah.
And then army is using a lot of fellowship.
Yeah, I was very lucky when just after I left, I was asked to come back and write the Army's followership doctrine. So did a piece of research, and then we wrote the doctrine note, and that was the first time that the Army had codified the other side of the coin, as they call it. And it goes back to my point. You know, the industry focuses far too much on the individual leaders, and not about what does it mean to follow. And I think this is I think this could be a game changer for organizations to understand. Yes, you need to, and the two work hand in glove, right? You can't have leaders without followers. They just don't exist. But followers have a responsibility. What does it mean to be a good follower? It means that you're proactive. It means that you understand the intent. It means you're professional. It means you live by the organization's values. That you show character and integrity.
Well. Yeah,
you're accountable for what your actions. You've got discipline, self-discipline. You play your part. I say too often we look at the leader, the person that's in charge.
Yeah.
And you assume if you get their behaviours right, everything else is going to follow. But that's not always a good. They set the tone, absolutely.
Yeah.
But everyone has a responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think that if I'm biased here, but I think if we, and in business as well, we had more conversation as what does it mean to follow? And I know the problem with follow and followership, it has quite a negative connotations.
Yeah.
Because people think of sheep blindly following on.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's about, as I say, taking responsibility, being proactive, being professional, giving your 100%, and showing initiative, what we call disciplined initiative, challenging, willing to have a different opinion. Disagree with, yeah. But also knowing that when the decision is made, you're falling behind it. You're not, you're not the critic who's constantly challenging and undermining the team as a result.
So that's this words explain. That's when we first start with our conversation, is about this like two sides. Even the teams, so leadership leaders this side, but at the same time coexisting with the fellowship as well.
Yeah.
So then they're matching together.
Well,
right?
it's a partnership. One doesn't exist without the other, but no one talks about this side.
No,
they
not
just
much.
talk about the leader. And also the reality is that leadership is a role, not a position. And that's why we, in the military, we distinguish between command and leadership.
Command and leadership, yeah.
So I may be the boss. Go back to my first platoon with 30 paratroopers in front of me. I was the boss. I was the one in the command. And I had an element, the real leaders at that moment were my platoon sergeant and my corporals. Because they had all the experience, they had the relationship, they had the trust and respect to the team. So I could say something, and actually the real leaders were probably them. They had more influence. If you're talking about influence, they had greater influence than I had because I was a new person. People didn't know me.
New person, yeah.
Yeah. I had power to influence because of my authority and my position.
Your command.
But not my personal power, because they didn't know me, didn't trust me.
No.
So, and that's why I had to build that up.
So you build it up. At the same time, those real leader, they acting like a followership, right? A followers for you.
Well, but this is the issue. This is how leadership and followership plays in any situation. The reality is that role, so not a position, but that role can shift and adapt depending on the situation. So,
true, yeah.
In that instance, I was following their experience a lot of the time. I often say 20 years later, when I commanded a parachute battalion, so 600-700 soldiers, I was the senior person in the room most days. But often I would be following people who are junior to me, because in that moment in time, they were the experts. They were the ones to be the natural leader. So really simple example, if we go down to the gym and we're having a PT session, a young Lance Corporal, 21 years old, one up from our lowest rank, they're the leader. And they're shouting and bawling at me as I'm running around the gym. But they're leading at that moment in time. I may be the senior person with 20 more years of experience and the boss of the whole, but they're showing that leadership. And I'm willingly following them because that's the environment, and they're the right people to lead in that moment. And for leaders, it's having that humility, or for senior people or people in positions of authority, it's having that humility and knowing when to lead and when to follow. It doesn't mean you're not in command. It doesn't mean you're not the boss. But there's times when you lead and there's times when you follow, and to ebbs and flows.
So that will leave a questions like, can someone be a brilliant leader but a poor followers?
What I would say is, if you look at the characteristics of what makes an effective follower and what makes an effective leader, they're pretty much the same. And when I do this work with teams, and I say to teams, okay, you lot think about great traits of great followers, and you look at poor traits of poor followers, and when we do that exercise, they list all these great things of what makes a number of the things I've said, what makes a good follower. And they realize actually they're the same traits as what makes a good leader. So in many ways, you're building up a lot of what I've spoken about in terms of self-discipline, initiative, professionalism, willing to challenge. A lot of these things, whether you're a leader or a follower, it just makes you a great performer and a great team player, and ultimately then you're going to achieve great things.
Yeah. But when you think about that, so this is a leadership at the same time of the followership. they're following the same traits to be good at both, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about your book.
Yes.
Okay. So you wrote the book, The Habits of Excellence. I mean, it is the British Army's official account of leadership. So drawing this 3 century of the experience, if I want you to give one core idea about this leadership, what is that going to be?
About British Army leadership?
The Habits of Excellence from your book.
There's so much in there.
One core idea, what is it?
One core idea, serve to lead. It's a really obvious one if you're in the military. It's the motto of the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, where we train our officers. It's on the cap badge, serve to lead.
Serve to lead.
Yeah. And it's about the leaders are there to serve their people. Their people are not there to serve the leader. So it's putting that the old school conception of leadership on its head. And ultimately it's about service. You're there to look after your people and to get the very best out of your people, to ultimately serve the mission.
Do you think that's like in the business this is also apply for the normal business?
I think
serve to lead for the CEOs?
What I say about leadership, I haven't had a conversation in the past 10 years in speaking to many business leaders across pretty much every sector, where someone has told me or conceptualized leadership in a fundamentally different way. We all talk the same language. Leadership is leadership. I often say the fundamentals endure, it's just the context that changes. Leadership for me is the same the world over, because human beings are fundamentally the same, and it's about people. It's about motivating people. So the context is king. Context is really important, and it will be different in different industries and different organizations and different teams, but ultimately we all talk the same language. So I think the core principles of how, in this case, the Army understands it and how we set it out in Habits of Excellence, I think are just as applicable in any other sector. It's just how you apply that in context. So in, the serve to lead, absolutely. If leaders have that mindset that my people are not there to serve me and do what I want them to do, I'm there to serve them. And if I serve them and look after their interests, they can ultimately serve the mission, the purpose, why we're all here. It's a different frame of mind. And there are many other sort of concepts in the book. That's one of many. But
that's a very good point. There are no such a things as a normal leadership, business leadership, or household leadership. It's all just one word, leadership.
We all talk the same language. We all mean the same thing.
Regardless about the industry.
It's all about people.
Yeah.
People are people the world over.
All right. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks, Jojo.
And give us the great insights about all leadership and the fellowship.
Yeah, very important. Thanks for the invite. Great to be here.
How can we find you?
Probably LinkedIn, where we find everyone nowadays in the business world.
You say not a lot of Langley.
As I said, there's not many Langley Sharps on
Langley
LinkedIn.
Sharps in LinkedIn.
So,
right? Okay.